You're listening live here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm your host, Todd Corder, this evening, filling in for Stephanie Stallworth. I've got Breck running the board here from San Francisco. He's with me. I've got Mark Mancini will join me shortly. He's filling in for JJ. Have a couple of guests this evening. Have Dave Cohen calling in, the voice of Georgia State sports, basketball, football, and baseball. And I have Deshaun Tate of 92.9 The Game, college basketball insider, joining the program. This is a special edition of ATL Prime Sports this evening. I want to make it about you callers. Please call in at 678-280-7123. That's 678-280-7123. You can follow us on Twitter at ATL Prime Sports. You can follow myself on Twitter at Corder Todd. You can follow JJ at JJ Get You One. You can follow Stephanie at ATL Traffic Lady. You can follow Mark at Mancini Sports. And you can follow us on the Stables Network on Twitter. You can listen in at Stables Network. Once again, the phone number is 678-280-7123. Special edition of Prime Time here in the ATL on ATL Prime Sports. Unfortunately, it's the coronavirus with the pandemic, and we're going to have a round-robin discussion here soon, what it's going to do not only to the sports world, but just in life in general. There's going to be a lot of changes out there, and we're going to discuss those. We'll go ahead and talk about the events that have been happening in the sports world. And before I do that, Breck, how are you today? And thanks for staying with me until the game comes on here from San Francisco.
Oh, I'm doing great. Appreciate it. No problem. I'm glad I could do the show with you tonight.
I'm glad too. It's just been going on. It's been a sad day, really. It's just been a sad day in sports, and a sad day here in the United States and across the world in general. This coronavirus pandemic has really has really affected just about everybody here in the world. And hopefully the WHO and the CDC will come up with a cure for this virus sooner than later. And our thoughts and prayers are out to everyone out there to stay safe. I know that schools will be closed in the metro Atlanta area starting on Monday through the 28th. That's the way it is in my son's school district. All local activities in the schools districts, they're all canceled all the way down to the elementary level. Youth sports is canceled, period. They're not taking any chances, and I think that they're making the right decision. As we know in the sports world, Major League Baseball is delayed at least 2 weeks. Spring training has been canceled. We'll go ahead and dive into that a little bit deeper in the show. Also in the National Football League, the owners' meetings are canceled in Florida. The NFL season, the season right now, the off season, they're going to go ahead and go ahead and continue with that. They're not going to change the schedule or anything like that. As of right now, the NFL draft is still on in Las Vegas, and we'll see if that changes. Major League Soccer canceled is for at least 30 days. So it's kind of a wait and see for all these sports. Hopefully one day soon we'll be able to pick it all up. Let's go into the NHL. They postponed, basically suspended play. They're about 189 games into the season, about 3.5 weeks left. It'll be interesting when and if the NHL does come back this year, what they're going to do with their playoff format, their regular season format. And same goes for the NBA. Their season was suspended. Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz contacted the coronavirus. He tested positive. That's what really started all of this domino effect, and that Breck is what started it all. I mean, Had he not tested positive, they would have been playing basketball games last night in the NBA. They would have been playing hockey games in the NHL. They would have been playing the NCAA tournament, the conference tournaments. They would have been playing the NCAA tournament coming up here next weekend. So, Breck, it's something like you mentioned in San Francisco. The schools are closed out there, and it's affecting all of us across the map. There's no doubt about it. Donovan Mitchell, his Utah Jazz teammate, Rudy Gobert's teammate, had his locker right next to Rudy Gobert's, and he now has the coronavirus. So, like we mentioned, the NCAA conference tournaments, they're all done. The only game that was played today was in the Big East. St. John's defeated Georgetown. And, the Big East tournament's done. The Power 5, the Big 10, the Big 12, the Pac-12, the SEC, the Ivy League canceled earlier. The AAC, it's all of them done. And, of course, the NCAA tournament was finally suspended. And what took the NCAA so long to go through this process to suspend it, I don't know. But at least they did the right thing. We can talk about that a little bit more later. Michigan and Ohio State, they canceled their spring football game. Michigan and Penn State called off its pro day. So you can name it. It's been canceled. I know that NASCAR is still going to run the next two events. They're going to run them without fans. Also, the PGA Tour Championship will go ahead and take place this weekend without fans. SEC spring football, the schools are going to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis, and we'll see what they come up with. But you can name it. All men's and women's college sports have been suspended. Duke, I thought, did a very good job today. They before the NCAA did anything, Duke was very proactive. They went ahead and canceled its sports. I know out there where you live, Breck, in San Francisco, they already said the Dodgers, the Giants, the A's, the Angels, and, they already said we're not playing baseball. They said no games in this state. The governor already went ahead. What's the governor's name out there in California, Breck? I forget his name. Is it Gavin Newsom?
Yeah. That's what some people call him. Some people have other names for him.
Well, we don't really get into politics on this show, but I can see the direction you're going. They went ahead and they knocked that off. In Seattle, of course, the Mariners, they were going to, if the season was going to continue, they were going to go ahead and play games at their spring training complex, which to me is absolutely crazy. I mean, I just couldn't, I could see the moment that Go there tested positive for the Jazz, that was it. That was it. The domino effect was going to be there. And you were going to see mass cancellations. And I swear, every minute when I was on Twitter or I was wherever I was, there was breaking news all day and every day. And, the various sports talk shows around the country, what are they going to do? What are they going to talk about? There's no games. They're going to talk about when possibly these games will start. We'll go into that a little bit tonight. We'll go ahead and we'll do that. Breck, I think we do have a caller on the line. We've got Wayne from Memphis. We want to make the show about our callers. And Wayne, welcome to ATL Prime Sports, and thanks for calling in this evening. You're with Todd and Breck. Thanks for calling the show.
All right. Hey, I think the reason that the NCAA decided to suspend the men's and women's Division I tournament is because they don't really have any type of mechanism to fill the tournament if all of the conference tournaments have been canceled. So it just makes it easier on them to just suspend it or, more or less cancel it, because how else are they going to legitimately fill those 60-something spots for everybody to play, And so, despite besides the coronavirus and, having players at risk, they really don't have a way to fill those slots and to create the brackets for a tournament because they've never had to do this before. And so I guess the only thing that may happen is Kansas may end up being the national championship winner with an asterisk.
I hope not. You're talking about the NCAA tournament that it has been canceled. Now, best case scenario, say this all is done in 2 weeks, and that would really be, I think, and a lot to ask for, but I do believe in miracles. Al Michaels does, yes, when he called the 1980 USA Russia semifinal game in the Winter Olympics for hockey, where the United States beat Russia 4-3, one of the greatest upsets in sports history. So I do believe in miracles. I mean, Wayne, when you look at these sports, they cancel them all. Baseball, beach volleyball, bowling, fencing, golf, men's and women's, gymnastics, men's and women's, ice hockey, men's and women's, indoor track and field, lacrosse, men's and women's, men's volleyball, outdoor track and field, rifle, rowing, skiing, softball, swimming and diving, men's and women's, tennis, men's and women's, women's water polo, wrestling. I mean, they didn't play around. They finally did it. What took the NCAA so long? I don't understand it. You've got billionaires from the NBA, trying to keep the professionals off the court, and you've got the NCAA dragging its feet with amateurs. I don't understand that, especially when all the campuses, Wayne, are closed across the country. I'm sure where you live is closed, correct?
Right. Well, yeah, the campus here is closed, and all the activities that were going to be there, including my son was supposed to go there for new student orientation, because he'll be starting at University of Memphis this fall. They canceled that, but they've also, next week is the spring break for the, kindergarten through 12th grade, and they extended that by 1 week, and so the students won't be going back to school until March 31st.
Wow.
But I think the reason it took the NCAA so long to do anything is because of their infrastructure is different than the NBA's. The NBA probably has a lot of people who are in a position of, authority, who can make these decisions without having to check with anybody else. Whereas the NCAA, who knows what kind of, stuff they had to go through to okay the cancellation of all that stuff. I just think that their infrastructure is probably harder to get through than the NBA's.
Well, you mentioned the word infrastructure. The conferences, they went ahead and they just did the tournament. They just canceled their individual tournaments on their own. They didn't even consult the NCAA, and the NCAA when it canceled the NCAA tournament, they really didn't tell the people in the conferences they were doing it. So the left hand's not communicating with the right hand, and you've got a sharp response here from SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. He said the surprise we made a decision now in mid-March not to play baseball or softball national championship events scheduled for June. I look forward to learning what informed that decision. I don't know. Let me see. The virus informed it, and you got to cancel it now. You can always open it up, and you can still have a partial regular season potentially down the line, and then you can have these tournaments if everything goes well. He said, I know what's informed our decision over the last day and a half or so, but the news from the NCAA we were waiting on, the basketball tournaments and some of the championships happening now, but obviously there was a decision to go further. Well, yes, you've got to go further in this case. This is not about sports at this point. This is about lives at stake. And, I mean, like I said earlier, Wayne, what's going to transpire here? I mean, let's say it does get better in 2 weeks. Maybe they'll bring the NCAA tournament back. I don't know. I don't know how they'll do it. I have no clue. I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think. I don't think they're. Yeah, I don't think they're going to bring that tournament back, because if they did, it would be so abbreviated. There'd be tons of teams that would feel slighted by the fact that they didn't get to play their way in.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. You got the automatic bids. I mean, Wisconsin ended up winning the Big Ten. I know. I do know that. So if you did have the tournament from the Big Ten perspective, Wisconsin would be the automatic bid. But that stuff really doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is they did the right thing and they canceled all this stuff. And once once Gobert became infected of the Jazz, you saw the domino effect. Wayne, if you want, I'm going to bring on some folks and you can talk to them too. I really appreciate you calling in. We've got Deshaun Tate of 92.9 The Game. Do you need to go?
No, I just wanted to say the other thing that got canceled recently was the season opening race for the Formula One. And the reason that was canceled is because one of the McLaren team members came down, tested positive for the coronavirus. So they were not going to be able to travel to Australia. And when the governing body saw that, they decided just to cancel that race. And their next race after that wasn't going to be for 2 weeks anyway. So,
speaking of Australia, Tom Hanks and his wife ended up getting the virus. So, right. I mean, what a news day from the moment that Gobert tested positive for the Jazz. I mean, it was surreal. I mean, you saw Mark Cuban, just shocked when he read his phone that the season was canceled. As we bring in Deshaun Tate of 92.9 Minute Game, our college basketball insider. We're going to get his perspective. Deshaun, welcome to the show.
DC, thanks so much, man, for having me on. It's a very, you know me well enough to know it's a very emotional day for me, and a lot of it still is taking time to process and really has not completely hit just yet. But I'm looking forward to sharing a few things with you about everything that has transpired.
Yes, I am looking forward to it. We're waiting for Mark Mancini to come on. He's in for JJ this evening. As we wait for Mark to come on, and we're also waiting for Dave Cohen to call in, the voice of the Georgia State Panthers. Wayne, before I let you go, Mark is in now. Mark, welcome to Prime. Welcome to ATL Prime Sports, and thanks for filling in for JJ from Los Angeles today. Thanks for coming on, Mark. Mark, you there? Mark? Anyway, Wayne, is there anything else?
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
From my personal perspective on the NCAA tournament, I'm a Memphis Tigers fan, and our season was lackluster at best and filled with all kinds of controversy. And I feel personally good that the season has come to rest, and that we can move on, even though it's been abbreviated in a postseason type of way. 21-10, not the record we were looking for in Memphis, but let's just leave it there. I'm glad it can't get any worse, and we'll just look forward to the next season coming up.
Well, thanks for calling in, and I look forward to some sports coming up. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself without any sports, honestly. I'm 55 years old, and there's never been a time in my life that I've never had sports.
You need to get that Xbox warmed up, man.
Yeah, along with my coronavirus suits. So, no, yeah. I know. I'm going to have to watch my wife's programs now, and that's just going to kill me. But anyway,
try to keep from interrupting her when you're watching the shows with her. I have struggled with that. But listen, have a good rest of the show, all right?
I like watching a little bit of live PD. That'll take some of my time too. Wayne, thanks for calling in this evening. You're a friend of the show, right, and we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you next week.
Fantastic.
Thank you. We'll bring in Mark Mancini. Mark, thanks for filling in for JJ out in Los Angeles. How are you this evening? You're on with TC and Deshaun Tate of 92.9 The Game.
Well, I'm waiting for the helicopters to come out here and start spraying California, Los Angeles maybe in particular, and waiting to be locked down for 2 weeks. Other than that, yeah. I had 3 games scheduled for next week, a hockey game and 2 basketball, but they're off the table. So going to have to watch reruns of my Pittsburgh Pirates.
You better go back to 1979. That was their last championship. We are family. With Dave Parker and
Willie Stargell.
Thank
John
you.
Candelaria. Yep. The list goes on and on. And yeah, the 79 last time they've done anything. But
with those funky hats when the stripe would go across the back of it, and they had the yellow jerseys.
Yeah.
And the We Are family. So I've got Deshaun Tate with us, guys. Let's go ahead and go to the NCAA conference tournaments. Let's do that first. We'll just take one sport at a time. We mentioned we don't think the tournament will be played at all. Deshaun, you covered Georgia Tech. You cover the Big Ten. You cover a lot of college basketball. You cover the NBA. Let me get your opinion. Do you think there's a chance this conference tournament, if everything goes well, will be played in 2 weeks? Not the conference tournament, just skip the conference tournament and go right to the NCAA tournament in 2 weeks. Is there a chance of that?
As much as I like to be optimistic about it and still keeping my fingers crossed, toes crossed, my eyes crossed even sometimes, do that for too long and I'm going to need glasses. But I don't think so. Honestly, I mean, it's kind of in the tank at this point. And in the event that was to happen, I would be really excited about it just because of the simple fact that when is the last time that we were entering the NCAA tournament or let alone conference tournament play? And you guys are a little bit older than me, so you may be able to, reference a particular year, but that there was no clear-cut favorite. I mean, I'm 35. I'm a really young guy. You guys are still really young as well. But I can't name a year that I've been following college basketball and it looked as wide freaking open. I know most people, the consensus are probably going to say Kansas or whatever, but they certainly weren't, invincible by any means either. So I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future, considering the circumstances. I think if this was a different type of situation, then maybe. But you just have so many players that's wide open to, testing positive for a virus and it spreading and sharing. And I mean, even think about this, where even in the event that they were going to play games with no fans in them, think about how balanced then that it would become for this tournament where, there's so many elite programs that travel so well, Kentucky and Kansas and Duke. And I know Carolina wasn't more than likely going to be in it, but to be able to see a game being played, it kind of takes me back to when the Dream Team had a behind the closed doors scrimmage with the college guys, and the word on the street was the college guys took care of business against those guys, with Chris Webber and Danny Hurley, or Bobby Hurley rather, and all those guys. And then, of course, they finally opened up the doors, and of course they got destroyed. But, there was just so many moving parts, so many good stories behind leading into college basketball, into the tournament. I mean, we've never seen a year where Dayton had a year like this. Who knows? What was the guy's name? Wayne. Who knows? Memphis might have went on a run in their conference tournament and won the doggone thing.
What?
I would have liked to think Carolina. Yeah, and that would have been possible. And I know Carolina was out already anyway, but it's just, and I hate to get so long-winded, but it's such an emotional time for me. That every Final Four that I go to, this is my 6th one in a row. I remember watching a documentary of some sort where there was a bunch of guys, I think quite a few of them have passed away now, but where they went to every Super Bowl since the very first one. And since my very first one covering was in 2015, I've gone to every Final Four since. And I was looking forward to this being my 6th Final Four consecutive, and I wanted to go on a similar streak to the way that those guys did. I'm a huge stickler for programs, magazines, T-shirts, and hats. And I go get one. If I don't leave that particular city that's hosting the Final Four every year, if I don't leave there with nothing else, maybe not a dime in my pocket, going all the way back to Atlanta from wherever that hosting city was, I had my magazine, my program, and I had my hat. And I can already see myself, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line looking for my 2020 hat and program, not being able to find it and not being able to remember why.
I can understand all that. I mean, I mean, hey, it's, this isn't something that, you've covered for years, and you've been to the Final Four, and you've seen the pageantry of the event, and, you've seen the kids perform at a high level. You see the fans traveling from the major schools. I understand how you feel. It's a void. What are you going to do now? Now that the NCAA tournament, that looks like the college basketball season is done. I mean, and also the NBA season is done. We'll get to that in a minute. Mark, let me ask you your opinion quickly. Do you think there's any chance the NCAA conference tournament could be played in a few weeks if things go extremely well, and maybe they only bring the players back, and then maybe the fans, I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't see how they do it, but maybe there's a silver lining. What do you think?
Well, I mean, and like Deshaun said, it's wide open in the tournament. I like Villanova. I like Providence, two teams in the Eastern Seaboard back there that, I think can do some damage. But I've never been a big fan, and I knew the NBA was going to go for this and we're going to get into that with the Brooklyn Golden State game today, because I heard the rumors a week ago maybe that they were going to go with the fans not in the stands, and I think that was just a travesty. I don't want to cover a game that looks like a practice, and I knew it had to get more, detrimental to the point where something would happen, because I thought to myself, okay, if a referee gets this thing or a player gets it, and then here we go with a player getting it, and then they shut the league down. But I don't know. I think it's going to have the NCAA is going to have to take the same formula the NBA has. Shut it down for 30 days and then reevaluate it. And then, they do some of these tournaments and, try to cram everything in. I don't want to see sports headed like Major League Baseball does, where we have 162 games and then we cram everything in 2 weeks with a wild card division, league championship, and a World Series. I think that's too saturated. So I think, these leagues got to really look at it here, but I think the NCAA has to do what like the NBA does, shut it down for 30 days and then reevaluate.
Well, I don't think the NCAA tournament has 30 days. Now, the NBA does, but the NCAA tournament does not. I think they've got 2 weeks, and they would have to start it, and I don't see it. Let's go ahead and since we're talking college sports, let's go ahead and bring the voice of the Georgia State Panthers in, Dave Cohen. Dave, welcome to the show. I know you broadcasted Georgia State's last basketball game of the season last night. They lost to Georgia Southern. I think it was 83-62. What is your opinion? Is there any chance, in your opinion, that the NCAA tournament could still happen in 2 weeks? Best case scenario, if all of a sudden everything went really well, or do you think it's done? And what do you think about the rest of the men's and women's sports that's on the calendar that's also been canceled for the foreseeable future?
Well, thanks for having me on again. It's always good to be with you guys. And of course, this one here tonight, under extremely bizarre circumstances, for those of us here in the United States. I just caught the end of the previous conversation while I was on hold. I'm not sure as of right now whether even in 2 weeks you could play an NCAA tournament, mainly because they could under the guise of putting a field together, just going by who won the regular season, because you're basically have halted play in the middle of some of the conference tournaments. So you wouldn't be able to really turn around and start those up again in order to play through the field in order to decide who would get the bid. So, you'd have to go back, and in the case of the Sun Belt Conference, it would be Arkansas Little Rock. They were the regular season champion. But then you have schools like Duke and Kansas, who announced earlier today that, and it sounded like, from what I read, and of course we live in a Twitter world, so you're reading everything in a very short number of characters, that they were pulling out of the NCAA tournament, even if it sounded to me like even if it was going to go ahead and be held. So now you've got a field where can you even fill out with 64 or 68 teams, depending upon if you're going to have a play-in game. And I'm talking about women's basketball as well, with regards to being able to fill out, a full bracket of teams, a full schedule, of teams to compete in the tournament. Again, we're kind of in uncharted waters here. I mean, this has not happened before. And so I think that at the end it's probably done. All the conferences have basically ended their tournaments, along with every other professional and minor league sport. I think the only sport that's still going to run is NASCAR in Atlanta on Saturday and or Sunday, and they're going to do it with no fans in the stands down at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and it will just be televised. But I think for the rest of the sports, and we're talking about college athletics here, I think it's done, unfortunately. And you feel for all those seniors, and all the kids that are on those teams that played hard all year. Of course, all teams play hard, but I mean the ones that were able to, win their regular season and really felt like they had a shot to make some noise in the Sun Belt Conference tournament. I know, we lost, as you said, to Georgia Southern last night. The Sun Belt Conference tournament, a little bit different format this year with games being played on some home sites after not going to New Orleans for the full tournament this year. They'll pick it up in Pensacola next year with all 12 teams. But, South Alabama thought they had a really good shot this year. They finished the season on an 8-game winning streak. They would have taken a lot of momentum in the Sun Belt tournament, which the final 4 teams were going to go to New Orleans and play at the Smoothie King Center. I talked to the South Alabama radio guy earlier today. They're all bummed because, like I said, they felt like, down the stretch they would be taking an 8-game winning streak into the tournament. Arkansas, Little Rock won 21 games after being picked to finish 11th in the preseason poll. Obviously, we saw them late in the season in Atlanta at Georgia State, and Georgia State actually beat them, played them really well. But they were, they felt really confident in the tournament. And the way Georgia Southern's playing, I mean, that there's no reason they couldn't go in and win 2 games. And Texas State beat Appalachian State last night out in San Marcos, Texas. Texas State finished strong down the stretch. So, just in the Sun Belt, you had 4 teams that all felt like they could have won that tournament, and then you multiply that across, all of the Division I conferences, and just a lot of disappointment. But you understand the reason why. I mean, again, we're dealing in uncharted waters here. I was telling somebody earlier today, being downtown in Atlanta today at work and getting ready to come home at late in the afternoon, to me, it kind of felt like it was 9/11 all over again, minus what obviously happened on 9/11. But the overall feeling with the schools announcing, the state of Georgia announcing today, Governor Kemp announcing today that, schools are going to close for 2 weeks. And it, again, something that has never happened before, that everybody is, I mean, it's a complete 100% life adjustment, not just athletically, but with regards to your life. So I think there's those of us that are in athletics that are super disappointed. I know the fans are super disappointed, but again, at the same time, it is life and or death, and it's got to be taken seriously. I think that like 9/11, the United States was caught off guard. And I think today, the United States, these last couple of weeks, as this has really developed and kind of happened, came upon us quickly, the United States and the rest of the world has been basically caught off guard with this. And it's going to create a new environment that we're going to live in, something new that we're going to have to deal with.
Well, hopefully we don't have to deal with this new norm. Hopefully not long. Hopefully they'll come up with a cure and things will go back to normal. Let's stay with basketball, gentlemen. I know, Mark, you cover the Clippers. Deshaun, you cover the Hawks. And Dave, you cover Georgia State. And I do play-by-play for Emory softball. And we don't have games to do. No more. All forks. We don't have any games to do. And to me, that is the weirdest feeling finality for a while. Hopefully, at the end of the month, things will change. To me, that's where the weird thing is, because you're supposed to be on the air. Deshaun, you're supposed to be covering basketball. Mark, you're supposed to be covering basketball, and let's shift over to basketball. Let's go to the NBA, because this is where it all started, guys. I want you all to stay on. You know, the season was suspended. We all know about the Utah Jazz player Gobert testing positive. And once he tested positive, the domino effect was fast and furious. His teammate Donovan Mitchell of the Utah Jazz also, his locker was right next to there. And what upset me about Gobert, and you guys can comment on all this, is that he was touching microphones. He was really careless with the whole thing, and he thought it was a joke and thought it was funny. And I just thought it was classless. And Mark, I'll let you go first. You covered the NBA on the west side, of the United States. What did you think of all that?
Well, at first, you hear the reports, and I'll tell you, just to let you know, this show is one of the best, with Breck producing and you hosting it, and Dave and Deshaun, and with Stephanie and JJ out there, man. I tell you, I'm blessed to have this great show on this network. But to answer your question about with Rudy Gobert, a lot of people thought out here with circles thought, does this guy have this thing, and why is he touching all the microphones, making sure he's touching everybody's microphone? So, and I thought to myself, that's not the Rudy Gobert I know. And, if he's making a joke of it, yet, play around with it, but then at the same time be serious enough, because, when I look at Rudy Gobert and I look at the Utah Jazz and also Donovan Mitchell, I look at these guys as class acts. They really are. And, but playing this joke on this thing really set it back with some people. And to me, I think it's he was joking around. It was classless, like you said, but at the same time, you got to have some common sense in making a joke of a situation where it's kind of wiped out a lot of people across this world. So, you got to look at both sides of it. But he should have had some better taste in this thing, and it's probably one of the things he wish he could take back.
I bet. You know what, Deshaun? Since Mark gave his opinion on this, give your opinion on the NBA season. What do you think they're going to do? It depends, obviously, when they resume the season. There's talk the season could go, because the arenas are, available, that they could have the season, the finals in July and maybe early August, play a couple of regular season games and go into the playoffs. There has been no talk about just ending the season and going right into the playoffs. They might have to have training camp. What is your thought? Because you cover the Hawks, and the Hawks are out of it, so they're going to end up playing a couple games, and that's going to be it from what we can get a feel. What is your feel about what will happen in the NBA? Say if they resumed in 30 days or 60 days.
I don't know. The thing is, I know that this may not necessarily be the most popular thing to say, but I honestly, I really don't know. I'm in a place right now where I'm just really not sure what to feel about a lot of it. Now, again, I know that that's not going to necessarily come across as radio gold, but I'm just hoping that some of those emotions more so will flow through the airwaves than me getting up here sounding like I know exactly what it is that they're going to do or what they should do. I think, the most important thing, obviously, is people's lives are literally at stake at this point. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that there's a piece of selfishness, because I'm human, that because I want to see more basketball played, and that I am disappointed a little bit, or a lot of it rather, more than I could probably admit to on the air. But I'm in regards to who will win this thing, or how they should go about forming it, or how they should do it, or whatever. Honestly, I don't know. With me being at the game yesterday, I mean, we knew that this was perfect example, going to be Vince Carter's last year. But nobody necessarily suspected that was going to be his last game, per se. So all of this stuff is just kind of wacky already enough as it is. To presume the NBA season, I think will be really interesting enough to see what comes out of it. I'm sure there's going to be people that want to put asterisks on anybody that wins the whole thing, which fair or unfair that is. And how many people will or players that is that will either play at full strength or play the same way that they once did, or keep it in the back of their mind when they're playing, of this thing is still kind of out there lingering somewhere, some kind of way. And how are they going to play the games with fans or without fans, or just whatever the case may be? So I think that there's still a lot of moving parts and still a lot of layers, to the onion that we kind of have to take off of this. And the selfish me wants to see more basketball, obviously, because it's what I eat, sleep, breathe, drink, literally. That's what my world revolves around, and much of all of us. So in regards to which direction that they should go, I think that's something that should kind of be left up to the league. It probably doesn't really matter a whole lot in regards to what it is that I say, but to continue playing, I mean, I'll embrace whatever decision that it is that the league wants to make, because that's the sport of basketball, and that's the league of the NBA that I fell in love with, regardless whether they decided to go on strike, whether they decided to play games or not play games within how many days after the Kobe Bryant death, or whatever the case was. I embraced that and I took that with me, and this is something that's obviously going to be a part of history, forever. But I'm just certainly hoping that whatever decision that they make, that there's not people that are putting, asterisks on if they do decide to continue playing basketball. And like I said, this is just something that's just going to be still in the back of a lot of players' minds. I mean, it almost kind of takes you back to, November of '91 when Magic Johnson kind of, came down with the whole HIV thing and how much that changed basketball. I mean, we are living history right now. I'm starting to feel kind of old, maybe kind of aging myself or dating myself a little bit, but I think that it'll make for a really interesting story if they did decide to play, let alone if they didn't decide to play. I don't know if guys would be trying to take advantage of load management, who's really hurt, who's really sick for real, and who's not. I just hope that it doesn't cause too much confusion. Again, I'd like to see basketball being played, but selfishly, again, but I definitely wouldn't be too upset if they just wanted to make sure that, people were healthy and able to play the basketball season when it is time to, get all this stuff resolved and everything else, and go out there and play carefree, because I don't want to see anybody out there playing overly timid or a playing style that's clear that, guys may not necessarily be giving it their all. So I know that that's really, kind of bringing it around full circle, but just an overall opinion, that's just kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, Dave, if you don't mind, I'm going to switch back and go to spring football. We'll go back to we'll do the NHL next because it's pretty similar with the NBA. Michigan, Ohio State, they canceled their spring football games. Michigan and Penn State called off their pro days. The SEC, they're taking it, I guess, on an individual school basis, what they're going to do with the spring football program. What do you think Georgia State is going to do with its spring football program? What do you think they're going to do?
Well, good question. I believe ours is scheduled for April 3rd down at Georgia State Stadium. I think, the larger question is, from a university standpoint, where are we by the time we get to April 3rd? As I mentioned, universities in the state of Georgia and the university system are going to close starting for 2 weeks on Monday. So the larger question is, when we get through these 2 weeks, where are we and where is the university system? So I think that's probably the larger question, which we can't answer as of yet. I'm not sure, I'm hearing so many reports on so many of the national TV and radio networks with regards to the overall picture of COVID-19. I think the large question is, to follow up on, what Mark and Deshaun were mentioning, how far away are we from, having a vaccine for this virus? I think that's the larger question. I know everybody wants to get back to the norm, and the norm may be, as we've said, a little bit of a new norm, but without there being a vaccine, and I could have sworn I heard earlier today, one of you guys may correct me, it sounded like they were saying a vaccine could be as much as a year to 13 months away. So that would preclude, moving forward, any of these leagues from returning in a month or 2 months or possibly 3 months. To me, that's the larger question. It's not when we're going to get back to the norm. It's going to be whatever the new norm is, whatever that looks like. But more importantly, is there a vaccine that is going to be available in a timely manner in order for the world to get back to being somewhat along the way that it was, before this all broke? And again, another of the larger questions is why was the United States and the rest of the world not ready and not prepared for this to come down and play out the way it's playing out? And those are non-sports answers to the question that you were asking. With regards to spring football again at Georgia State, again, right now I'm not sure. All we know from a university standpoint is that the basketball season is over. Spring sports are done. I did the Georgia State, Mercer baseball game on ESPN Plus the other night. That was the last game for me. They beat UNC Asheville last night. They're supposed to open up Sun Belt Conference play this weekend against South Alabama here in Atlanta. That's not going to happen. Basically, nothing's going to happen. But above and beyond, how far are we, the world, all the developing nations, from having a vaccine that could allow you to hold a Final Four with 60 or 70,000 people filling up a dome the size of Mercedes-Benz Dome, or an NFL game in Mercedes-Benz Dome, or in any of the domes that these teams play in, or hold an NBA game in a 18,000 seat arena, or a soccer game inside, a massive stadium. I mean, if we could be 5 months down the road, there's still no vaccine, and is it going to be any safer to be in a building with 60 or 70,000 people watching a sporting event? That's the big question.
And better yet, what's the economy going to look like? I mean, we're talking everyday life here. We all know the Dow is taking a massive tumble. So, I mean, those are more important questions, even though we like to focus, like you said, on the sports world. But yeah, that's all very depressing, and let's pray and hope that doesn't come to that. Boy, that would be awful. Mark, Dave, I know you guys are NHL fans. Deshaun, I know you like a little bit of hockey too, even though you're a big basketball guy. You're from Michigan. You're probably a Red Wings fan like I am, even though I wore the Bruins hat down there when I went down to watch a Georgia State game when they lost to Georgia Southern when Dave was doing the play-by-play, because I love the original six. I've got a hat for every original 6 team. But what is the NHL going to do? They were the last ones to, make the decision of the 4 major sports that they were canceling. And what are they going to do if and when they start playing again? Mark, what do you think? Because I'll say what I think really quick is that they're going to play a couple of games, and their goal is to crown a Stanley Cup champion. I heard that today on the NHL Network. I heard it on other various talk shows that their goal is to crown a Stanley Cup champion. Maybe they would have a play-in game. Maybe they would have just a few days of the regular season. So everybody, some teams have played more games than others in the NHL. And I'm sure, Deshaun, that's the same in the NBA. Nobody's played the exact amount of games at this moment. So both leagues, will have to do some tinker if they're going to come back. But Mark, what do you think the NHL will do? Because you've covered the Kings and the Ducks out there in California. What do you think the NHL is going to do?
Well, and I want to piggyback what Dave said too. With everything going around in this world, and I've been blessed enough to survive the Legionnaires, the bird flu, and all this other stuff. But I really put it to the higher power, and I put it in his hands, and he has the answers and where this thing's going. So I don't really worry about it as much as maybe some other people. But when I look at the NHL, I was getting ready to sit down with Carey Price on Tuesday and talk to the Montreal Canadiens goaltender and stuff. And I think what the NHL is going to do, and what we might have here if this thing gets backed up, we can have ice hockey going into July and August too if this thing doesn't get situated along with basketball. And then people will have, if it gets back to normal, then you can have, baseball. People have their choices of where they're going to go. So it's going to affect the gates at Major League Baseball. But as far as hockey goes, anytime you can slow down the Washington Capitals, it's a big plus for me being a Pittsburgh Penguin guy. But when you look at the hockey, I think what they're going to have to do, they won't have the luxury the NBA has. They might just cut this thing in because you're going to have to get the training camps going. If they go 30 days, you're going to have to get the people ready and stuff. And you know how the NHL goes. They go these 4 out of 7 right out of the gate, too. So, how they're going to have to do it is I would just, cut the regular season and get into the playoffs after you get into the training camp. Now, there's going to be.
Oh, you mean for next year? You mean? Are you talking for next fall? If they do,
no. I would if they're going to resume the season right now in 30 days, then you're going to have to get the training camps open for at least a minimum. I would think of 2 weeks. So you cut down on the injuries, and then I would just get right into the playoffs.
They said they weren't going to do that. They said they weren't going to do that. They'd have to have a couple of games, like I said, to try to equal out the everybody playing the same amount of games.
Yeah, but the only thing with that is, and I want to give the other guys the floor too, because I don't want to. The only thing is, seeing the Kings play a couple more games ain't going to do anything. They're 20-something games out of a playoff spot anyhow. So if we're going to get more teams that are on the bubble right now,
that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, then but I don't see, having the Kings play another week. They've been out of it since December anyhow. It's not going to make a big difference.
Well, I meant the clubs that are right there. They talked about playing a couple of games, playing a play-in game, and then starting the playoffs. The playoffs did start like in July. Then, next year you're going to have a shortened training camp. You'll shorten the preseason games, and then you'll play 70 to 72 regular season games. And, if all goes well, they would shorten the regular season. They could do that because their goal, once again, is to crown a Stanley Cup champion. So that's very interesting. We'll have to see what they'll do. Let's go on to Major League Baseball. And, that they're the ones that have, besides the NFL, they have the most time of anybody, Deshaun. They've delayed at least 2 weeks for spring training's been canceled. So when they get the season started back over, they're going to have to do some spring training, more so for the pitchers than the hitters, because the pitchers are going to, you're shutting down their arms, then you're opening back up again. And, the season's going to start late. I mean, the last time they had a strike shortened season, if anybody's an Atlanta fan, the Braves won the World Series back in '95. When in '94 they had the strike, and the Expos were 6 games. The Montreal Expos back then were 6 games up on the Braves in '94. Well, '94 season was done to the strike. It started late in '95 because of the strike, and now this season's going to start late. What do you think Major League Baseball is going to do, Deshaun? Do you think that they'll just have to shorten some regular season games because you can't be playing baseball in the Deshaun, did I lose you? Anybody else out there? Dave, Are you there?
I'm here.
Hello? Oh, hey,
I'm
Dave,
here.
what do you think the Major League Baseball to do? We seem to have lost Deshaun for some reason.
Well, what do they play? 162 games. I mean,
yep.
Again, is it necessary to play 162?
No, it really
there's
isn't.
some folks. Right, there's some folks that think that baseball. Well, granted, it won't be the norm of a full season. That Major League Baseball, again, because of the sheer length of the season and the number of games, would transition really without a hiccup, other than a loss of regular season games. Maybe you just focus in on league games. You wipe out the interconference games, interleague games of Major League Baseball, and whatever it is, whatever the timeline is that they decide as we proceed through this, that they could potentially start, a starting date. You back it up a couple of weeks. You put in an abbreviated spring training, or a continuance abbreviated spring training, as you said, maybe more so for the pitchers than the position players. They decide on a date, and then they just start playing. Do they play 100 games? Do they play 85 games? Do they play 120 games? Nobody knows, because we're so early in this process, obviously, that you can't come up with a timeline. You can't come up with a potential date.
Dave, what season was it? Was it 81 when the Dodgers played the Yankees in the World Series? The Dodgers, they won that series with Davey Lopes and company and et cetera, Steve Garvey. Wasn't that the season where they split it? It was a strike where they played so many games the first half. You had a first half divisional winner, and then you had a second half divisional winner. Do you think something like that's possible? I know they did that in 81.
Yeah, I mean, right now, honestly, anything is possible. I don't remember exactly what year that happened, but I do remember that.
I'm almost certain it was 81.
I don't remember exactly. Yeah. Certainly, you could do something like that, have a mid-season. Once they settle on, well, first of all, once there's a start date, you could break down how far you want to play out, and play whatever the number of games that you end up playing. There could be a mid-season, a halfway point. You play you play an all-star game of some sorts if you want to keep that norm in the game, and then you play the second half, and then you get right into the playoffs. And maybe the playoffs are a little bit abbreviated this year, because obviously, like you said, you don't want to be playing baseball as you're heading towards the Christmas holiday.
I was right. It was 1981. I did get it right. My age does help, being 55. That's correct. They did. But the All-Star game that year was originally played on the 14th of July, but was canceled due to the strike. So they had a first half winner of the season, and then they had a second half winner, and that's how they broke down the tournament. Like the AL champions was the Yankees. The AL runner-up was the Athletics. The NL champion was the Dodgers. The NL runner-up was the Expos. And the Dodgers did beat the Yankees in the final. I was right. It was 81 where they did that. So, that would be interesting if they did that, or they just cut down like they did in 95 after the strike. I want to say in 1995, they played 144 games. Or it was either 140 or 144. I'd have to look it up. But, Major League Baseball, they have, Mark, and guys, they have the most cushion to play with besides the National Football League, because the NFL, this is the offseason. They said they were going to go ahead and go with their offseason, even though the owners aren't going to meet in South Florida for their meetings. They did cancel that. But, the draft, if we can switch over there, would be very interesting, Mark, because you can have the draft over the phone. You don't have to be in person. So if this continues to go on, the NFL can have its draft. Wouldn't that be interesting if they did it over the phone and still put it on? I don't know how they'd put it on TV. I guess they'd have cameras in every war room, any draft room that these guys would be around, and they'd draft on the phone like they did in the old days.
Yeah, and you know what? That makes sense. I mean, you see what guys are doing with the combine. The Rams didn't send nobody out to the combine. They get the results. They can get it with the technology today and everything. But just to answer your thought on the baseball thing, 81. I remember that, and it was a strike year, first half, second half winner. But what I would do with this baseball season, I would take it one step further. Wherever you start is where I would start the season. So if this thing gets pushed to, April so-and-so, like on a Friday or something, and, I happen to be looking at it right now. The Pittsburgh Pirates are in Los Angeles that weekend. That's opening day. And then you would do that. Now, what might happen is somebody might say, well, we didn't get to play, a lesser 500 team. We had to open up with such and such. And if we lose this thing by a game or something, it wasn't fair. But I'll tell you what's happening in Los Angeles. If the Astros didn't get the Dodgers and the Red Sox didn't get the Dodgers, coronavirus got the Dodgers. So if this thing definitely shuts down baseball, boy, I'll tell you one thing. The Dodger fan is really thinking to himself, what's going on here?
Well, they've won 7 division titles. The Braves won 14, and they won 1 World Series, and the Dodgers are halfway there. They haven't won yet. They kind of remind me of the Braves in the 90s. Great starting rotation, really good lineup. Bullpen was their Achilles heel, except for the year in 95 when Mark Wohlers delivered the World Series against Cleveland. So, interesting time in the world of sports. Of course, it doesn't compare to the rest of the world and how serious things are. And I'm going to miss watching sports on television, and I know you guys are too. It's going to really seem weird not do broadcasting games for you guys. I know it is for you guys. I know it is for me. And it'll be weird not watching games on television. I'll have to watch what my wife wants to watch, and I'm not so sure if I'm mentally prepared for that yet. But well, I'll give it my best shot. I mean, Dave, what are you going to do? You're not calling Georgia State baseball. You're not, the basketball season did end for you the other night, but it's going to be different for you. You're not calling Georgia State baseball games.
Yeah, that'll be a little odd this time of the year. So, you get that feeling on some nights, and I'm sure I'll get it. You feel like you're supposed to be somewhere, and then you snap into reality and you realize why you're not there. And I'm sure that will happen. But I'll go ahead and make my recommendation to you with regards to viewing. My wife and I, I was on the road trip to Georgia Southern probably about a month and a half ago, and I'm sitting in the hotel there in Statesboro. No knock on Statesboro, but not a whole lot to do there. And I'm watching HBO, and I think I kind of stumbled across season 4 of Homeland with Claire Danes and Mandy Patinkin. I think I watched about 4 or 5 episodes that night, and then the following morning and afternoon before I had to get a shower and get on the bus and get over to Hanner Fieldhouse. Anyway, I got home Saturday night, Sunday morning, and when I got up Sunday morning, I told my wife, I said, I started watching this show on HBO about the CIA in the Middle East. I said, this was a great show. I said, we got to watch this. So no lie, that Sunday morning, we went back and started on season 1, and we watched a couple of episodes. We try to watch a couple of 3 episodes every night, especially if I'm here and not having been on a road trip with basketball. But anyway, my recommendation to you is start watching Homeland. You got a lot to watch because I think right now they're in season 9. But it's a really, really good series, and that will be a great way for you to get lost in a series on HBO or Netflix or whatever, and maybe help you for a little bit. Just forget about watching sports.
Well, I love Live PD, so we watch that together. We do watch NCIS and the FBIs and all that. So we do watch stuff together. It's just, man, I was really looking forward to watching the Boston Bruins in the NHL playoffs. That Pasternak line is the best line in the NHL. I thought they would go in and win it all, but I know the East is so tough. And, it's a void. I mean, it's a void for all of us. But the thing is, we still have our families. We still have our health. and we have to be really happy for that and pray for that continues. I want to thank you guys for coming on this night. Deshaun had another commitment, so we had to get off the air, and I appreciate you guys staying on with me, and appreciate Breck in San Francisco with the board, and I appreciate you, Mark, in Los Angeles, and I appreciate you, Dave. You've been such a friend of the show here in town in Atlanta, and we'll talk to you guys all in the near future, and thanks for coming on, and that'll be the end of the show. We'll talk to everybody next week, and good night, everybody. You're listening to ATL Prime Sports. You can catch us on Twitter, you can catch us on Facebook, or you can catch the show online. Good night, everyone.